Good evening. I'd like to call the December 19th regular board meeting to order. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Chambers, will you call roll, please?
Mr. Nichols?
Here.
Ms. Pritchard?
Here.
Mr. West?
Here.
Mr. Ross?
Here.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the,
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the November 21st Board of Education meeting.
thank you, Mr. Ross.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. West. Are there any changes, questions, comments regarding these board minutes? Hearing none, Mr. Chambers?
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additions, removals, or modifications by the board to this evening's agenda?
No, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda. I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Mr. Chambers?
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sable?
I'd like to invite Mr. John Leatherman up to the front. He's our principal over at the Evolve Academy and this month's district presentation.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's an honor to be here. Merry Christmas. As Mr. Sable said, I'm Mr. Leatherman, the proud principal of the Evolve Academy. And I know that we have some longstanding board members and a board member that I know very well. But for the three board members I haven't presented in front of before, I thought I would just kind of fill you in a little bit on what goes on and share a little bit about us. Mr. Comer told me to make sure I had that on. Okay. So if you look at our screen there, a couple of things. First of all, big thanks to Mr. O'Call from our business department. He helped us get a new sign. We have 2 new signs in front of the building. Also, our building's front of our building, our theater, as we call it, once the sanctuary will be 100 years old, I believe, in February. But we needed the new signs, and also the seal that you can see on the T-shirt a little closer. He had helped design that for us as a surprise in the winter, and we got a new podium with that on there. And so that's kind of an exciting thing for us. Tonight I'm also going to focus a little bit on relationships and partnerships, because that's a big, important piece that we hear about a lot, but just how it works at Evolve. And also on the screen is one of our outside providers that provides OT. And then the picture from us and our T-shirts there, that's Mrs. Erickson and Mrs. Shabrowski, a couple of Medina City teachers. That was for our appetizer open house. So my first year we switched to, first full year we had appetizer open house. We invite the entire family. We get a good turnout that way. I guess if you feed them, they'll come. But that way we get to meet everybody, and it's a fun setting. The families follow their students' schedule, and then we have a little bit of time to enjoy some food. Okay. All right. All right. That's okay. Mr. Komar went over multiple options with me on the remote. Another thing to focus tonight is just that we are still a school like any other school. We're a smaller school, and I will give you some specifics on that. But on these slides, you see Unity Day in the upper top left. We had multiple pictures that day of everybody donning their orange colors. It used to also be known as an anti-bullying day. So that was a big success. Another one of our providers, that's Mrs. Heath, one of our speech therapists in the lower left. And like any other school, there we are down at the creek, and I did kind of cut Tyler's hand off there. He's got a crayfish that I guess I slid the picture a little too much. Young man there in the lower picture, he's working on his Apex elective classes. So just like all of the high school students here at the Medina High School work on electives, so do high school students at Evolve. And he's with Mrs. Hamidi, who is one of our long-term subs this year. Okay. Spirit Days are big. We do pull from more than just Medina City. We pull from all of Medina County and a couple schools outside of Medina County. So Spirit Days are very fun. You can also see there, if you look at the adult teams, we team up with a Medina City teacher and a therapeutic behavior specialist from the counseling center. And I'll share a little bit about that new partnership in a few minutes. But the top picture is Mrs. Erickson and Mr. Hendricks. Mrs. Erickson is our Medina City teacher, Mr. Hendricks from the counseling center. They both happen to have gone to Buckeye, not at the same time, so they donned their own old uniforms for us. Lower left-hand corner, we've got Mr. Marable there and Mrs. Shabrowski, and they are Jake and Flo, our insurance experts from that day. And then a couple of our students came dressed as superheroes. Another fun thing we did that day was our entire theater was set up as an escape room. So each class had a half hour on there with clues and lights and all kinds of things to try and figure out their way out of the escape room. And it's a very fun thing on that day for our students. Okay, so Mr. Ross asked me about Thanksgiving. Well, you know, good things and bad things did come out of COVID. So we did used to host a very large Thanksgiving with over 120 guests. Obviously, when COVID came, we had to scale that back. The first year, we couldn't even use our kitchen. We brought in food from Bueller's. It was all individually packaged. You guys know the story. What we did find, and I know this might make Mr. Ross sad, but we'll bring him as a special guest or something. That did trigger some behaviors. A lot of the kids that come to Evolve we all have different reasons to come to Evolve, I often say. But anxiety can be one of them. So when we brought in a large host of people, although it was exciting for me and my staff, for some of our kids, they could also bring their extended family. It kind of became a stressy day. So we've done 2 more years where we just use Bueller's, and it's still a family meal. We set the tables. We do the placemats. We do all of those things in preparation, but it's more like 50 of us instead of that many, and the students seem to enjoy it more. We sit, we have music, we talk. That's our school-based therapist, Miss Martin there. And then that's just some of the layout. Huge shout out to talk about relationships, but Cheryl Kerr, who handles the catering for Bueller's. The prices went up from last year, just the way everything we heard went up from COVID, and so they had some kind of corporate help and got our price almost the same as it was the year before with a nice donation. So. And once again, like any other school, we have science. So right there, we were doing edible DNA during the month of December, and so they were able to create their DNA strands and then, of course, taste them. And then the student right there in front of the Christmas tree, he came down because he had built the largest DNA tower, and so he had a chance to win some prizes. This is a newer thing. We have started to have a a celebration of graduation. So as an Evolve student, you'll always be part of your home school, and you'll get your diploma from your home school. But for some of our kids, you talk about anxiety, going to the graduation, say Medina, 600 people practicing is pretty stressy. So we have started this where we have a certificate of graduation completion from Evolve. But the families come, you can see the table is set there, and it also came out of COVID at first because we had to be spaced out, only have food at that table, only take masks off while we eat. But it's very nice. It's a casual evening, and it's a great chance for those families to celebrate that moment with their student, and realizing that it's a special moment, and if they don't feel like walking at their graduation, then they've still had that moment. We bring a speaker. Last year it was Coach Hass. The year before it was Ron Blue. So you never know. One of you sitting at these tables could be this year's speaker. So, and Spirit Days, we just try and do them because I think some of our kids, they need a feeling of family, so we do try and always have a Labor Day picnic or a Memorial Day picnic. We'll sometimes celebrate opening day and have hot dogs and just things that maybe they don't always get. But Spirit Days are big. But so we had the 12 days of Christmas, and we had ugly sweater and Santa hat and red and white and all kinds of things. So a little bit about us. So I said I would double back on our new signs with the seal that Mr. O'Call helped us design, and Mr. Mishler also was a big part of that. So we have on the bottom of that sign, we believe in building relationships, setting goals, and celebrating successes. Just a quick refresher, we service between 30 to 40 students annually, grades 5 through 12. All of the Evolve students are on an IEP, individual education plan. We generally take students who have been unsuccessful in a regular school setting. That doesn't mean they were necessarily misbehaving. There could be all kinds of things, trauma, a background, family change, something that affected them at some point, and they need a different setting. And sometimes they just need a building that has 40 or 50 total people than hundreds. And I've worked in lots of big buildings, love big buildings, but it just caters to what they might need. The goal of Evolve is to always return the student to their home school. We do have some options if that's not something they want. If they don't want to go back to a big place, then we have some options. We have 5 classrooms staffed with Medina City teacher and a therapeutic behavior specialist, like I talked about. We're partnered up with the Counseling Center of Wayne and Holmes County, and I have a slide about that. Evolve has a school-based therapist who works on IEP goals as well as daily stressors. They can also do a release if the students have an outside therapist, but we're not trying to work on the really big things, what's going to keep them making it through the day and being successful at school. But it's a very nice perk to have one therapist for that amount of students. And every student receives monthly individual therapy and daily group therapy, and it's all part of their plan as an Evolve student. Recent successes: last year we had 7 sophomores that were accepted into the many career centers. So we use Medina County Career Center. Wadsworth has a compact with like Norton and Barberton. And then we had 1 student from Triway who was accepted into the Wayne County Career Center in the hospitality program. So, it's another thing with relationships. I had the current superintendent's students when I was at Claggett, and as soon as I got the position, I called him out at Medina County Career Center and said, hey, I have a dream, I have a goal, I want to get some of these kids to the Career Center. So, that's a great thing. Currently, 3 seniors are on a daily work study assignment, either through OOD, the JOG program, which is a job program for students or adults in Ohio, and or our business relationships. And each year we have a large host of graduates. Some of our students can graduate early. In fact, today we had a clap out today for one of our seniors. He's from Wadsworth, and he met all of his requirements. He was one of our work study students, so he was kind of neat to see his transcript. It has the 2 seals on there now, the color seals, the new process that we're doing with graduates. And he'll have a letter that says he's met all the requirements, and he'll still come to our ceremony in May, and will walk at Wadsworth if he so feels like he can. My kids will sometimes ask me, what do I have to do to move on or do this? So we talk about, have you worked the program? So can you be an active participant in group? Are you an active participant in group? A good active participant? Have you set goals in your individual therapy? You're working wholeheartedly on those things. And are you engaged as a student in the classroom? And then when those kind of things are ready, then we talk about what's kind of in this lower paragraph. Maybe it's time for you to go back to your homeschool setting. We'll convene an IEP meeting. Everything happens with an IEP meeting. But we also try to get the kids in the Career Center. We do work study. Today we held a meeting with opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities for one of our seniors. He just finished a 2-week job period. Now he's going to go out for a month with coaching, and if that goes well, then he's going to be placed in a job. And so to see that and to see his mother so excited, those are those moments at Evolve that, that really are you've done something good. So our new partner, the Counseling Center I guess on the left side, you've got Medina City. We've got 5 fully licensed intervention specialist teachers, 1 principal. From Garfield, we get cafeteria service, nurse, office support, secretarial support, custodial, and then, all of the things in Medina. We've got transportation, maintenance, pupil services, central office, tech department, business, HR, registration, treasurers. On the counseling center side, what we need from them is we need the therapeutic behavior specialist. We need the 1 fully licensed base therapist. They have not 1 but 2 child psychologists, which is kind of a rarity. One is always available virtually. The other one is in a satellite office in Wadsworth. In relationships as well, their CEO, Dr. Karen Beery, long time, had worked at Alternative Paths, had worked at Catholic Charities. I know that she knows Dr. Qualick well. But I reached out to her when we were taking quotes, and we also met them because they were teamed up with a student we had from Triway. So it's been really good, and it's nice to have a new, fresh partnership. So. And then this is a little, I don't even know who sent me this, but it did come to me when I first took the position at Evolve. And it's on a color thing I leave on my table if you've been in. It says, the kids who need the most love will ask for it in the most unloving ways. And sometimes I have to remind my staff of that. We have a great staff. Sometimes we'll have a debrief if we've had a challenging day. And so I will sometimes say that. And Mr. Sable, I don't know, maybe this applies to board members, but it is good to remember when it comes to kids anyway. So we sometimes have to think about that and remind ourselves of that. So. Just some shout outs. We work with all of those organizations there. Certainly JOGS, OOD I talked about. A small portion of our kids can be court involved, so we work with the JDC, Job and Family Services. We welcome the Medina Police to come in and walk the building and be a familiar face with our kids. We partnered today with Medina County Board of DD, with the OOD for that meeting I talked about, the Career Center. More recently, we do have like 18 business partners, but we don't have our Business Buddy mentoring full in swing. But what we've tried to do is get some of our older kids placed in work situations that maybe couldn't get in the Career Center, weren't interested in returning to their home school. John Stahl, who owns PJ Marley's at Farmer's Table, and he's sat in your seat. He's been a Buckeye school board member for a long time. I think he's done now, but he's hosted our students. The Wadsworth young man I talked about just finished a full half year at the Farmer's Table. Mina from Sports World, luckily her daughter is one of my teachers, Mrs. Erickson. I have called her when we needed pants, if a pair of pants split or somebody's clothes were extremely dirty or maybe not fitting us right or not school appropriate, and she has, run us seconds and, misfits or things that have been misprinted. Laura has been outstanding at Cool Beans. We go up there for cookie baking. I'll call her and be like, okay, I'm bringing 10 for hot chocolate at whatever time. Can you guys do it? And then we've had a lot of kids successfully working at Goodwill. Bonnie Becca kind of chairs that, and I had her girls in school years ago. If I were to name all of the friends of Medina City Schools that helped me, it'd be too many. But, when I first took the job, I was calling all of the principals that I knew. Certainly, I work very closely with Mina Pazicka and Dr. Qualick when you're running a building that's kind of an all special ed building. So, and lastly, when we talk of relationships, we had a student's bike who looked really bad. I saw Jimmy from the maintenance department, who's now the president, I believe, of the OPSI. He gave me a wrench, and we were trying, and he said, Mr. Malakowski has a bike swap program. Mr. Malakowski's a PE teacher at Claggett. Called Mark, took the lower left, Danny's bike there, traded it in. He was going to use what parts he could. He and I rode these bikes over at the old soccer stadium and made sure it worked. Took it to Danny's house, and then about a month later, that student right there needed a bike, and I was able to get it to him right before Thanksgiving break with the nice weather. And we can have some trying days at Evolve, but getting to deliver those bikes, it was pretty nice, pretty special moment. And so, and Century Cycles partners with Mr. Malakowski with parts and fixing things that he can't fix. So it's all those relationships of this amazing city and Medina City Schools and those kind of things. And other than that, I would thank you for your time. Happy holidays. We often, if I say we are Evolve, it Evolve, and I'll say we are, and they'll, chant back Evolve. That's our little saying. But if anyone has any questions, I'm able to answer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leatherman. I also have missed the Thanksgiving dinner after so many years of attending, but I totally understand. It was a large group. It makes sense to have a much smaller group, and whatever is best for the kids is what we need to be doing. So thank you.
Yeah, we try and get that bigger feeling with the appetizer open house, but it's a little less stressy. Doesn't mean it won't come back, because it was fun, but it is about the kids. So, anyone else? Okay. Thank you.
Just want to throw a few kudos John's way. I know when I first came to the district 8 years ago, Evolve was in a situation where it was struggling. I think we had 3 or 4 students in the program at the time, and we were questioning Evolve's future. Chris, in particular, was quite an advocate for the Evolve program and the students that it served. And when John came in and really turned the program around, and it's financially a self-sufficient program that really provides services and needs for students, not just here in Medina City Schools, but as Mr. Leatherman mentioned, for surrounding districts. I think we've served students not only here in Medina County, but Summit County, Cuyahoga County, Wayne County. I knew there was one I was missing. So it's a great program. I'm going to go a little bit off my agenda here just to stick with academics and invite Mrs. Cassidy up to talk about our 3rd grade test scores.
All right, good evening. So every fall, our 3rd graders take the fall reading and writing Ohio State test. And this year we were happy to see that our scores were actually back to pre-COVID levels, because as all test scores, we noticed a decrease in scores due to the pandemic and the educational disruption. So we use these scores. Our state has a 3rd grade reading guarantee where students who don't meet 3rd grade proficiencies need to be retained at the end of the year. So we use these scores as a guide to let us know which students have not met proficiency, and then we plan instruction accordingly. So in the past couple of years, because of the pandemic, the 3rd grade reading guarantee wasn't mandated. They gave us a waiver on that. But this year, the 3rd grade reading guarantee is back. So that is something that we are working on. So students have multiple opportunities to show what they know through the year, so that they can prove that they have met that proficiency. So they will be able to take the Terra Nova reading test. We offer that twice, and then there's also the spring test. So again, we were excited that we saw a rise in our fall scores again, and we just look forward to continue to serve the students and make sure that they're all proficient by the end of the year. Are there any questions about?
I have a question. So basically, though, this test is measuring what they know after 2nd grade. So they haven't.
Oh, that's a great question, Jean. No, this is actually an end of the 3rd grade test. So
Okay.
students take an end of the year test at the beginning of the year in October.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we use this as one measure, but then we also use our district assessments as well to give us more information. Yeah. All right, thank you.
It's nice to see our students doing so well, not just coming post-pandemic, but also seeing the results of our labors with the curricular initiatives we've been working on over the course of the past several years, and to be able to see that success despite the challenges of a pandemic, I think really speaks volumes, not only to the work that we've been doing, but also the quality of our teachers and the efforts our teachers have been making to implement that curriculum. So I want to make sure that we do recognize our educators as well. Redistricting and facilities, I do want to provide the board an update as to where we are at. We do have some important things coming up in the new year, and we're going to be talking a lot more in depth and detail about the redistricting and facilities processes in the new year. On January 31st, we are going to be holding a community meeting at the high school in the media center. That community meeting is going to have two parts to it. The first part is going to be a formal presentation provided by the school district. That presentation is going to include components by myself, Dr. Kwolek, by Mr. O'Call, as well as Mr. Chambers and Mrs. Cassidy. We're going to be covering everything from why we began this process and the need for redistricting to the decisions to look at our facilities because of the need to redistrict, what redistricting could look like. We are in the process of working on some rough plans of what redistricting would look like under our yellow plan that we're moving forward with. That's redrawing the boundaries down at our elementaries and middle school level with the yellow plan, as well as what it would look like if we didn't do any construction due to not having the fiscal means in order to move forward with that. So we want to make sure that our community has all that information. We also will have some very rough architectural drawings showing what a potential new Claggett could look like, as well as an expansion over at Root. In addition, we're going to outline the pieces of the plan that are must-dos. Moving forward with the yellow plan, we know that we need two bigger buildings. We're looking at a new Claggett, which would occur across the street from the current Claggett building. And we would need an expansion of Root in order to be able to house all the 5, 6, and 7, 8 students. Also with the yellow plan, we also know that we would be looking at the conversion of Heritage from an elementary building to a preschool facility. In order to do that, we would be looking at a new building on that site as a preschool facility. In addition, we'd also be looking at the closure of Garfield. Those are the things that we know would definitely happen underneath that yellow plan. We would anticipate that there would be further discussion as to other possibilities and wants, needs, and likes that the community as well as staff might like to see happen as part of those plans. We have support organizations such as Kids First and our athletic boosters who are going to be helping us out on the 31st. Once we finish the formal presentation, they're going to be doing breakout groups to talk about other components of plans that could occur, such as the conversion of Garfield Elementary into a board office or the potential of a rebuild of Fenn Elementary. So there's a lot of things that could happen as part of the plan, but maybe we choose not to go in that direction. And that's where we're going to need feedback from the community. So all of those specific details are going to be coming out on the 31st during that community meeting. We're going to be following up that in-person community meeting with a virtual one on February 2nd. That virtual meeting on February 2nd is going to be the exact same format. We're just going, in terms of the how the meeting is going to operate, it's just going to be done in a virtual format. So we're trying to make the meetings as accessible as possible to as many of our parents, community members, and staff as possible as well. We will determine the need for potential additional meetings following those two meetings, but we didn't want to overwhelm with too many meetings up front. We're still looking at November for a bond issue, as well as an operating levy, and we'll be having further conversation in the new year with the Board of Education in regards to what that may or may not look like, as well as determining what kind of millage we'd be looking at, which will be determined as we are having these discussions in January as to exactly what our plan is going to look like. The other piece of the redistricting and facilities process that we're ironing out is what the OFC funding may or may not look like. I can tell you that this is a challenging part of the process, as we are viewed by the OFCC and the state as a wealthy district. So our eligibility to funding is not very high, and the funding that we may be eligible to receive, we won't even be eligible to receive for at least 8 to 10 years down the road, which is something we knew from the onset, that we would need to upfront the money and be looking for reimbursement down the road. The process that we're currently going through is submitting plans to the OFCC so they can determine what they would be willing to fund or not fund. Eventually, we are going to need to work with the board to make decisions as to whether we want to proceed in collaboration with the OFCC or not with this process. If we do proceed with the OFCC, eventually the board is going to need to approve a plan for final submission to the OFCC. Now, you might question as to, well, why wouldn't we if there could be some additional money down the road? Well, the reason why we may not is because there's the potential that we could have cost savings by not proceeding with the OFCC. And I know that may not completely make sense, but the reason why is because there are so many requirements and parameters that you have to follow in going along with the state funding, that it might end up actually costing more and taking more time to move through the process, and ultimately costing more money with the small amount of reimbursement that we will get, that it may not be worth moving forward with the OFCC. So right now, we are working with the architects and the OFCC to try and determine all that so we can provide the board as well as the community with all of that information. We actually just had a lengthy meeting this morning, our board office team with our architects, and our architects are working very closely with the OFCC to try and determine all of that. And that is something that we knew early on in this process. Historically, when we've done construction in our district, the decision has been made in the past not to move forward with the OFCC for these reasons. We wanted to explore the possibility before determining that that wasn't the right decision to make, and we still don't know whether it is or not. So I'm just trying to be upfront as we're going through the process, because we are getting to a period of time in the next several months where decisions are going to have to be made. We did talk today with the architects, though, and just from a timeline piece, moving forward with the OFCC with construction, they will put extra parameters in regards to things that you have to do with the construction, which could create a lengthened timeline and cost in getting materials. And the number that I received this morning is it could be somewhere around, and this is extremely rough, but a 5% increase in costs in going with the OFCC, and that's just really rough. In terms of timelines, we've seen timelines anywhere from 3 to 4 years, additional timelines in construction working with the OFCC versus not. So you see a district like our neighbors over at Highland that put up 3 elementary buildings in the matter of a year. That was not working with the OFCC, that was working independently. So lots of decisions to make, a lot less flexibility in regards to what we want to do with our facilities. But again, if we're going to get adequate reimbursement that's not something we want to take lightly when we're talking about community's money. So some big decisions coming up down the road, but we're making really good progress, and I'm excited for January when we're going to have some things to really share out with the board and our community. I do anticipate that at our January regular meeting that we'll actually have some architectural sketches that we're going to be able to share with the board. And so our goal is to share those out with the board prior to the January 31st and February 2nd meetings before they go live to the community, so that our board will get first look at those drawings.
I don't know whether you stated a time for the meetings. I mean, I don't want the audience out there who's watching to not be able to come because they don't know what time. So is it going to start at 6, 7?
Yeah, we will be getting information out. I think we're looking at a 6 o'clock start time right now, but we will be advertising that all over our website, and I'd imagine we'll get something out into the Gazette as well, because we want to make sure that people are aware. Any other questions about facilities and redistricting?
It is very exciting, Mr. Sable, and I do want to thank you for your due diligence and your team's due diligence in evaluating all the opportunities that may exist. It doesn't hurt to go down that road and exhaust it with the OFCC before making any final decisions. So thank you for that.
And then the last item I have for tonight is we do need to get an organizational meeting on the calendar since we're heading into the new year. This is not something that the board needs to approve, but we need to agree upon a date. Dave and I talked and met with Ron and Becky at the end of last week. Typically, we try and do it the first Monday or first full week Monday that we're back in the new year, and that would be January 9th at 6 o'clock. Normally, it's 2 or 3 back-to-back meetings because there's several work meetings that we have to hold to start off the new year, in addition to the organizational meeting, which includes a finance meeting as well. I would also recommend that we still hold our regular meeting later in the month in January, so we can do regular board business. In the past, we've combined that with another meeting, but I think we'll need our regular meeting later in the month. So if that works for everybody, I'll work with Lisa on getting that out on the calendar and making sure that everybody has invites. And that'll be right here in the PDC. We'll actually set that meeting date at that organizational meeting on the 9th. But I think we were talking about the 23rd. And what we'll do is we'll actually send out to the board before the end of the week. We have a list of all the committees that everybody served on this year, and a draft of the meeting dates so that you all can begin reviewing that prior to the 9th. So we'll work on getting that out to the board before the end of this week.
Back when I first came to the district, one of the first things I noticed is that the district did not use their investments with an investment advisor, and most of their monies, if not all their monies, was in Star, Ohio. I asked the board at that time, I believe it was June of 14, to let Ryan Nelson become their investment advisor. Ryan was with a different company that I don't want to say at this point, but now he's with Red Tree. And so I invited Ryan here today. A number of board members have listened to Ryan give a pitch on our portfolio and where we stand, and so we invited him back here today to basically do the same thing. So Mr. Ryan Nelson from Red Tree.
Thank you, David. And there was nothing wrong with the other firm. Nothing nefarious. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here again at the board meeting. My name is Ryan Nelson. I'm with Red Tree Investment Group, and as David mentioned, here to kind of give the annual update about what's going on with the district's investments, what's affecting investment decisions, and as we move forward into 2023. So I believe you have it on your board docs, but hopefully it's working here on the page. And we got Craig over here helping me out with that as well. Just real quick on page 1 is an update just for those of you all, just a reminder about who Red Tree Investment Group is. We are a firm that is focused on investing public funds across the state of Ohio. And we manage a little over $7 billion in investments, over 300 public entities, and actually over 200 K-12s these days. So many of you across the state. So do understand the challenges that the school district does face in making decisions. And we're an independent firm. One of the co-owners, Jennifer Trowbridge, is the other co-owner. One of these years, she's coming up here to do this meeting. On page 2 is how it came to be between Red Tree and Medina Schools. The partnership did begin in June of 2014, so a little over 8 years ago. And we assist on a portion of the district's funds, a portion of their operating funds, and work closely with David and his staff on cash flow needs, sending monthly reports. And additionally, U.S. Bank serves as a third-party custodian and holds all of the assets that we assist on. On page 3, just a review of the permitted investments of the school district. The school district has an investment policy statement, and that investment policy statement follows the Ohio Revised Code, Chapter 135.14. It was last updated in May of 2021. And what you see here on the page and on the screen is the world that David lives in as he's investing the district's funds. It ranges from bank products to CDs, to Star Ohio. Star Ohio is the state-run investment pool. It runs like a money market fund. Other investment options are U.S. Treasury securities, government agencies, municipal bonds, and commercial paper. The main investment objectives of the school district is safety of principal, liquidity, and a market rate of return. Keep those in orders and keep yourself out of trouble. This past May, we did start adding commercial paper into the portfolio. That was approved by the board, and very, very baby steps. So a couple $1 million that has been invested in commercial paper. Generally, the maximum maturity is going to be 5 years on any one security, but it can go out to 10 years on a municipal bond. So that's the world that we live in as making investment decisions. Just a couple of quick comments on the economy. An update as we're making investment decisions. A lot has changed in 2022. It has been mind-boggling the speed of what has changed here. We are continuing to see growth. We saw a growth in the GDP in the third quarter. So people continue to spend. However, there are signs that is starting to slow a little bit, and we'll talk about that. Jobs remains resilient despite all the news that you're hearing about a potential recession. And maybe some industries actually laying people off. Inflation, unless you've been living under a rock and that rock hits you on the way down, you know that we've been seeing higher prices for everything that we're purchasing. And certainly this is just not a risk here in the United States. It is a global risk. Everything that's going on over in Ukraine and Russia conflict is certainly having effects on the global economy. A couple quick points here on those economic numbers. Inflation has moved down ever so slightly. It does remain at a 40-year high, and it has fallen down to 7.1% from a summer high of 9.1%. So the trend is your friend. So we are moving in the right direction. It does remain stubbornly high. Even if you look at overall inflation versus core inflation removing energy in the quarter, but it has started to slow. And the reason I have bah humbug on here is because we're rolling in, as we know, to a very busy time for shoppers, and all eyes are on the shoppers going to continue to spend. We have seen on this chart, it's hard to see, but you're seeing increases in food services and drinking places. I mean, it is that time of year, I guess, to go out and enjoy some holiday cheer. Grocery stores and taking care of folks to fill the tables. but you are seeing issues in department stores, furniture stores. The reason I want to point out furniture stores, you have seen a slowdown in housing because of higher mortgage rates. So what happens if you don't buy a new house? You don't buy the new couch, you don't buy the new bed, et cetera, et cetera. So you are seeing some slowdowns in those areas. But all eyes are on holiday spending. I just stopped at Target on the way over here. They're spending plenty over there, by the way. I had to stand in line. Next slide is I talked about the job market. The job market does remain resilient. There is a correlation here. The biggest area is seeing job increases is food services, drinking places. So there is a sharp correlation there to people that are looking for jobs to who's out spending, and the healthcare industry as well. We have seen still an increase in non-farm payrolls. Wages did surge over 5% in 2022 so far. But one point here, there's over 10 million open jobs and only 5.1 million people looking for a job. So you should not have an excuse if you don't have a job. It just depends on what that job is and where it's at. The next page is really the big story of what's happened in the markets as it relates to investing the district funds, and that is simply the historic rise in interest rates. This is the largest increase in this sort of period of time in modern history. Now, what modern history is, they're going back to the early 80s, but it is the most aggressive rate hikes since 1983. The Federal Reserve has raised short-term interest rates over 4% this year. If you can see kind of all these squiggly lines there, I've got 2022 way over there on the left. It's virtually almost a straight line about what has happened here over the past 12 months. Generally, rates do not increase like this. When I was here this time last year, the Federal Reserve was predicting maybe possibly they would raise rates by maybe 25 or 50 basis points in 2022. So clearly, they lied to us. Their rhetoric was way off, and look what has happened this year. So it is a historic rise in interest rates. It is remarkable about what has happened over the past 12 months, and we are expected to see this trend continue until the summer of 2023. So you're going to see these higher rates. And then the prediction is that they're going to cut rates. So maybe just in time for the school district to pass the bond levy to issue debt. On the next page is to show this in some numbers about what has happened. A couple of benchmark rates here, a couple of different points of time from the end of November of 2022 back to this time last year. Some benchmark rates that we do follow are the Treasury rates, the United States Treasury rates. The 2-year, we follow the 2-year U.S. Treasury when making investment decisions. At the end of November, it was a 4.38%. This time last year when we talked about this, it was 0.5%. That's a significant difference in a very short amount of time. And it's been a whirlwind about what has happened this year. Star Ohio, which David mentioned is an investment option that the district does utilize, this time last year was 0.09%. That was hard to say in a meeting. Now it's pushing 4%. That's wonderful as you all are investing funds for more interest. One thing I do want to point out here is a potential tea leaf, and that is around the 2-year Treasury and the 10-year Treasury. As you can see there, the 2-year Treasury is a 4.38%, and the 10-year Treasury is a 3.68%. So the longer they go out, the less the yield. Something's wrong in the world when that happens. That's what's called an inverted yield curve. So historically, typically, when you see an inverted yield curve, meaning that the shorter term rates are higher than the longer term rates, it is a sign that there's a recession down the road. And that's generally about 18 months if you follow history. So that is a tea leaf, and it is the largest spread between the 2-year Treasury and the 10-year Treasury since the 80s. So that's the world we're living in. I'm not to press you here, but that's the world we're living in, and that's if you look at numbers and you follow math, this is concerning when you see such a big spread between the 2-year and the 10-year Treasury rate. So that is where we're at with interest rates. Expect short-term interest rates to continue to rise. Those longer-term interest rates, which are controlled by what the market thinks, may not. So short-term interest rates like the 6-month Treasury and the STARS are controlled by what the Federal Reserve does. Longer-term rates is what you hear on CNBC and what they think that they're doing. And they're not always right on CNBC either, or Bloomberg or whatever TV thing you watch. The next chart, I do want to give just a real quick Bonds 101, Fixed Income 101, to talk about what happens when interest rates rise when you own a security. So this is called what's called the seesaw effect, and it's called the price-yield relationship. And why am I talking about that tonight? Well, we've talked about the dramatic increase in interest rates that we've seen here in 2022. And the district owns marketable securities, such as Treasury securities, government agencies, CDs. So those securities trade every day in the market. Their value is marked, not every day, but it's marked every minute for that matter in the market. So when interest rates go up, like that we've seen over the past 12 months, the value of any security that the district owned has gone down. And David sees that when he gets his monthly statements and makes a few comments every once in a while. But the market value follows interest rates. So it's called the seesaw effect. And if it would go, it would be the opposite. If interest rates went down, your bond prices would go up. And in this market, it is exasperated because of such the big change in interest rates. But keep in mind that if you hold that security to maturity, it will mature at its par amount, and it will mature at its par 100. So there's no issues. The issue comes between not knowing the liquidity of your school district's needs, and you would have to sell something prior to maturity, and you've seen the market value fall, and you would have to take a potential loss on the security. So that said, there's a lot of communication going on between us and David and other investment professionals here. There are some liquidity. The district's balances have shifted downward, I guess is a good word to say there, over the past couple of years. And just on timing of getting monies from either the state or from the county, in this time of year, cash balances run really, really tight for the school district. So we're in communication with David, making certain that we don't invest in something that he may need next week. So thank you, David, for making certain that is not happening. But just wanted to point that out, that this is what's going on in the world, something we're following really closely. Next slide, real quick, I want to talk about the total district's funds. We serve as the investment advisor for a portion of the district's funds, which is right around $24 million. The district utilizes Star Ohio. And then additionally, David works with 2 other different investment institutions, Fifth Third Bank and what's called multi-bank securities, where he purchases those securities individually himself. And he's been having communication with them as well about the liquidity, potential liquidity of the district's funds. Total funds are all around $58 million. And again, those have shifted down since we've been here over the past 8.5 years with that. Lastly here on Red Tree and Portfolio Summary, just a couple of highlights I want to talk about. The weighted average maturity of the portfolio is a little over a year, and we purchased a lot of these securities back in the dark days when interest rates were at 0, and they're going to have to roll off the portfolio is the term. But what is important to look at is the maturity distribution of this portfolio's funds. We have a lot maturing. About 21% of the portfolio matures in 23, and then another almost half the portfolio matures in 24. So when I come here next December, I will have different news to report on about how this portfolio looks. Why is that important? There's a lot of securities that we purchased back in 2020 that are earning near 0, and we're going to be able to take that and purchase securities earning 4 and 5%. So it's going to be a much different look for this portfolio as we move forward. I mentioned commercial paper. We did purchase a couple of commercial paper holdings back in the summertime. Some of those have matured, and we're just holding out those in cash right now until we hear from David here in January. But the portfolio is well diversified, and we'll be looking much different as we move forward. Any other questions before I close up here? Just some closing thoughts here. The investment strategy right now is to focus on liquidity and then reinvestment of funds here in 23 and 24. Interest rates, expect higher interest rates on the short term, but the longer term, we've already seen them starting to come down. And I can't stress this enough. Communication is critical. We cannot do our job without having a good communication link with the school treasurer. That is certainly something that we do have here. Not only myself, but David is very comfortable calling the office for anybody there to ask questions on. So kudos to him. Any thoughts, questions, concerns? Good?
Thank you, Ryan. We always appreciate you coming down and spending time and giving us a presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Good luck with everything here. Most of all, have a great holiday season. So, no snow, right?
Yep.
I'm going back. It's coming? I'm going back south for that.
Thank you, you as well.
Thank you, Ryan. Following that, I'd like to talk about the district bank balance as it decreased $3.1 million in November to $64 million. This is $4.3 million below last year at this time. The 5-year forecasted revenues were below last November by $1.4 million. Real property and property tax allocation account for this decrease. A major portion of the decrease is the property tax allocation, which is your homestead and rollback monies. These came in from the county, which came in from the state, I should say, and was allocated to us by the county here last Friday. So that is helping us with our balance itself here in December. The 5-year forecasted expenditures were below last November by $80,000, which means that our expenditures are below last year by $80,000, which is a good thing. Purchase services, capital outlay, and transfers and advances accounted for this decrease. The sales tax fund balance decreased to $2.2 million. The district spent approximately $1.3 million in November, with the majority of the expenditures on our COPS principal and interest. The rec center capital fund balance decreased to $144,000. The district spent approximately $15,000 on flooring and received $1,000 from the city as reimbursement from a September expense. The district received $73,000 in investment income in November. Ryan just got through telling you why. And this is approximately $244,000 above last year at this time. And finally, the district forecasted true days cash is estimated to be 177 days. This is down from October by 7.6 days and below last year by 20 days. Questions? Yes.
Supplies and materials, that it's up like 39% from a year ago. Is that just because of still the COVID effect?
Part of that is COVID. The other part is we're still purchasing textbooks, and textbooks are considered a supply.
Okay,
So.
thank you.
All right, next I have the supplementals. On your agenda, you have supplementals. The first thing I'd like to spotlight is the Spotlight on Students is a new fund that we're starting here over in the Communications Department. The Athletic Fund is looking for $30,000 in addition. They have the cash. The budget itself is looking to spend more on the students. And then you have all of your 500 funds. These are your title funds itself. These are federal funds, and basically these are carryover monies from last year's federal funds. And then you have the additions of the ARP IDEA Fund and the ARP Early Childhood Education Fund. And finally, you have fund-to-fund transfers. These fund-to-fund transfers are to pay for the principal and interest that went out here in October and also here just this past month. Questions? Thank you.
Board communications. If we'd like to just go around the horn, if anyone has anything they'd like to
Sure.
update us, thank you.
Since this is supposed to be about, education, I would like to commend our 2 National Merit semifinalists, Giovanni Stabil and Braden McCord. We also had 1 commended scholar, Colin Berberek. So great job for them, and I just wanted to give them a shout out. The debate team at Princeton, they had 11 kids make the final rounds, and there were only 2 schools from Ohio when we were the only public school from Ohio. The other one was Hawken, which probably costs a parent about $40,000 a year. Choir concert and encore Christmas concerts. I got to see part of them. The crowd was really into both, and as always, the choirs and the directors did an amazing job. The Tutoring Center and National Honor Society hosted cookies and cram for exams for the freshmen. Just reminder that the Medina City Schools Foundation is still selling raffle tickets for over $50,000 worth of prizes. Tickets are $50, can be purchased online. I went to the Kids First breakfast. I didn't eat. I just went to introduce myself and talk to the people. I found out about a lot of new toys when I asked the kids what they wanted for Christmas, and I'm like, I'm usually up on toys, but these were, one little girl gave me a long list, and she said, but I still think I'm going to add to it, and I said, well, with shipping delays, go ahead. So I would like to thank Kids Medina, Kids First, the Student Council, and Applebee's for their support. And sports teams are doing well. I went to the bowling match last week and got to see a record broken. So I would really like to suggest to everyone, bowling is really great. About an hour and 20 minutes. And they're done, and the kids are excited, and we bowled Keystone, and they were like going crazy cheering. So I asked Mr. Sable if we couldn't get some cheerleaders over there. And then the swimming, I got to see a record broken, and this weekend they were up at Spire, and they broke 4 or 5 different records. One warning, if you go to a swimming meet, do not wear any heavy clothing because you're going to lose about 20 pounds while you're sitting there. But it was a lot of fun, and I'm glad I got to go. And I would just like to wish everyone a happy holiday. Thank you.
All right, for this meeting this month, pretty short. We had the curriculum committee meeting, ended up being canceled. We didn't have a finance committee meeting. All the committees I was on, there wasn't anything new to really report back to. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to go to the Kids First pancake breakfast, which would have been awesome. The little guy would have loved it, but everybody was getting sick in the house again. So eventually we'll get out to a pancake breakfast and see Santa and all that. But I don't have a lot to really add on to what Gene had mentioned. I didn't know about all the records being broken, so Gene, thanks for informing me on all that. Yeah, this is where the time of year where things start picking up for the school district. You have your choir concerts, theater, those type of things that they've been working on stuff for the first half of the year. Make sure to get out and go and see what the kids have been working on, because it starts to get busy now from now until the end of the year. Finally, I'm going to say happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, because Hanukkah started Sunday, I believe, just to make sure I cover my bases there, and have a safe and, good holiday season and a new year. And going into the new year, I got a couple requests for everyone. First off, stay weird, stay curious, and stay humble. And finally, stay safe. That's all I got.
I don't have anything to add, other than just want to wish from Mr. Sable down to our last ranking person, whoever that is, wish our entire staff, our kids, parents, our community, just a wonderful holiday season. And enjoy your break. That's it.
Not too much. I did attend the Encore Christmas concert that Gene was sitting right beside me. Really good time. Lots of talent in the arts in this district. We're very fortunate and lucky in that respect. We did have a facilities meeting back at the beginning of the month, I believe. And there was a lot of discussions, and there'll be a lot more coming forward with plans for redistricting and building and all that kind of good stuff. And just to follow up on what I mentioned in November after the school board conference, and I had mentioned I had taken my son and his 3 roommates out, all from Medina. Mentioned that they felt very well prepared, and they all came home from OSU after finals. And my son was conveying to me, and they were all 4 of them had stories of going into these finals, and a lot of the kids, this is calculus and physics and engineering, so tough, and conveying stories of, yeah, I went in and we had 2 hours to do the final, and we were done in 30 minutes, and it was really easy. So, again, kudos to Mr. Smith and Mr. Razzo with these 4, that our students are very well prepared when they go for whatever. So I think we're very fortunate in that aspect. So that was nice about that. But other than that, I hope all of Medina City Schools has a really nice break. So that's it.
Thank you. I don't have anything to add, except I know this is a busy week with everyone wrapping up finals and grades and exams and elementary classroom parties, and I just want to thank everyone in the district for all their support and everything that they've done. This semester has gone by really quick, and I hope that everyone has a healthy and safe winter break. Thank you.
I actually have one more thing to add, too. Andrew speaking made me think of it. I think you mentioned it last January or February, one of the two. Just a community PSA. Obviously, right now, there's going to be winter break, so you don't have to worry too much. But as the snow comes, make sure to clean off your sidewalks, across your driveways, all that stuff, because last year, Andrew had mentioned that kids were walking in the middle of the street because snow was too tall or too icy or whatever it might be. And then some other kids were just walking through the snow in tennis shoes because they didn't have boots, didn't want to wear boots, whatever the case is. So yeah, little PSA there. Just clean off the sidewalks if it comes down for us.
Okay, we've reached the point in the agenda for public participation, and I don't believe we have anyone who has signed in to speak. So we will waive the reading of the rules and move on towards our treasurer's action items.
Board, if it pleases the board, it is recommended the Board of Education approve the November 22 Treasurer's Financial Report. It is recommended the Board of Education approve the following supplementals to the 22-23 permanent appropriations. We have our 018 funds, our 300 funds, and our 500 funds. And finally, it is recommended the Board of Education approve the following fund-to-fund transfers from the general fund to the energy and transportation bonds, and from the sales tax fund to the COP bonds.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Pritchard. Thank you, Mr. Ross. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none. Mr. Chambers?
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sable?
Number 1 is donations. It is recommended that the Board of Education accept the following donations to Medina City Schools. I do want to point out the $8,600 donation from the Sidney Fenn Elementary PTO. The Sidney Fenn Elementary PTO is splitting the cost to put a new digital sign in front of Fenn. This is the way we have installed the digital signs in front of other buildings across the district through a cost split with parent organizations. I do want to point out that the sign will be able to be moved or readjusted in the event that there's any construction over at Fenn. Number 2, Medina City Schools plan for gifted students. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the Medina City School District plan for the identification and service of children who are gifted. We are mandated per legislation for the board to approve the district gifted plan on an annual basis. This is the same gifted plan that was presented to the board last school year. Textbook adoption. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the Medina High School English Language Art textbooks for the 22-23 school year. These are the books that were presented to the board and put for public preview at the last board meeting. Number 4, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the service agreement with Pearson Assessments for full use of the digital assessment library for Schools Plus for all digital testing products per attached lists. This is a 3-year contract in the amount of $52,800 and will be paid for through federal funding using American Rescue Plan, ARP, and Redirect 516 funds. And this testing is for special education services. Transportation payments in lieu, and these are for additional students. We have approved some of these already. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve the payments in lieu of transportation for the attached list of additional students from non-public schools and students living outside the non-public school attendance area who are ineligible for transportation for the 22-23 school year. The board has approved an overall resolution for these. Legislation or current legislation requires that each individual student that comes through now be approved. Number 6 is stipend payments. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the stipend payments to Lauren Bradley, Amanda Casey, Eric Cott, and Mike Wayand in the amount of $200 each, and Jason Campbell in the amount of $375 for serving as cooperating teachers for Kent State University students, and to Deborah Hicks in the amount of $350 for serving as a cooperating teacher for a Lake Erie College student during the fall 2022 semester. Field trips. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following overnight field trips in compliance with Policy 2340. These are field trips, the Student Council Leadership Training, as well as the Softball Cal Ripken Experience that our students have historically taken in the past. And last but not least, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following personnel recommendations pending completion of all required paperwork, including BCI and FBI fingerprint and background checks. You can see that this list is quite a bit shorter than usual. I think part of that has to do with being in the middle of the winter athletic season, which is a longer season, especially with the holiday break in the middle than the fall and spring. We would like to see more subs on this list. And again, it's nice to see our community and parent volunteers on this list as well.
I'll make a motion to approve the superintendent action items.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Thank you, Ms. Pritchard. Any questions or comments from the board?
I have a question. When I was reading over the gifted program, and it's quite lengthy as far as drama, music, art, do we have anyone in one of those programs for, any of the arts that you know of?
Yeah, I'm actually going to invite Tina up to answer that question.
Oh, yeah. When I was reading over the gifted program, because this is the first time I've, seen it, I noticed big, long sections for drama, music, visual arts, dance. Do we have any kids that are receiving gifted credit in those areas?
No, we don't have any gifted services in those areas.
Okay.
If teachers or parents request, we assess in those areas, but we do not provide service.
Okay, that's all I wanted. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Mr. Chambers?
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
And Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. My screen has frozen up, so if someone would like to make a motion to move to executive session.
I'll make a motion to go into executive session to consider the employment, discipline, compensation of a public employer official, and discussion with the board's legal counsel of disputes involving the board that are subject of pending or imminent court action.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. West. The board does not anticipate taking any action when we return from executive session. Mr. Chambers, when you're ready.
Yes, Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Pritchard?
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming this evening. We wish everyone the happiest of holidays. Please be safe out there, and I hear there is a big storm coming, so hopefully everyone gets to where they need to go and stays warm. Thank you. We'll see you in next year.